And for more on this, I can bring in Mathilde Vu, who is Sudan Advocacy Manager with the Norwegian Refugee Council. Good morning, Mathilde, and thank you for joining us. Human rights groups have raised the alarm about the humanitarian situation in Sudan. Can you tell me more about what is going on in the country at the moment, as you understand it?
Sure. We're at the breaking point right now. As I'm talking, there are mass atrocities being committed in North Darfur in El-Fasher. This is a city that has been basically on the siege for the past 500 days and more. What I mean on the siege is that people have been starved and people have been bombed. No humanitarian aid has been able to filter into Fasher. And then now there's been a terrible assault over this past 3 days. People are trying to flee, but they are executed on the way. They are detained on the way. They're starved on the way, raped. And we're looking at really unfolding massacres right now happening. This is happening in North Darfur, but there's also a significant level of violence also happening in the south of the country in Kordofan, with possibly as well a repeat of what is happening in El-Fasher with siege and attacks on civilians. This is total nightmare.
Now, things have certainly worsened in the past week, but the situation has been dire for most of the 2.5 years of this conflict. Is it possible at all for aid groups to operate anywhere in Sudan at the moment?
And you're pointing something important. People are exhausted. People are seeing 2.5 years of war, the largest humanitarian crisis in the world, the largest displacement crisis in the world, a famine that is spreading across the country, cholera outbreak, and this is the daily lives of people since the beginning of the war. It has been possible for humanitarian organization to work in Sudan. My own organization, NRC, is right now receiving people who are fleeing El-Fasher or being shocked by what they see. But to be very frank with you, the warring parties have not let us work the way we need. The fact that the RSF has blocked access into El-Fasher for more than 18 months is an outrage. The fact that we're not able to reach all the areas in the country because the warring parties are not respecting the basic rule of war is an outrage, and there should be way more pressure from the international community to let aid flow where the people need it.
Now, just on the subject of pressure, international pressure, many in Sudan feel that their conflict has been forgotten or at least overshadowed by events elsewhere. Is there frustration that there is no international pressure being exerted on both sides in the conflict to bring an end to the violence?
Absolutely. I was in Darfur a few months back, and people were telling me that they feel forgotten, and they're right. There hasn't been a level of international pressure that we've seen in other crises, like in Ukraine, for example. Where are the statesmen at presidential level? Where is the actual pressure on the warring parties and on their backers to make sure that protection of civilians is upheld, to make sure that the humanitarian access is, protected. And another thing as well is that you can see it in the funding that is getting to Sudan. Since 2025, we humanitarians are struggling really to respond to what is an overwhelming crisis because there is simply not enough international solidarity for the people of Sudan right now.
And you mentioned that lack of international solidarity. Do you find that at a governmental level, or also are you finding it actually difficult to fundraise just privately as well?
At the moment, it's been extremely difficult to just raise the alarm on Sudan. Okay, so governments have turned inwards, right, since 2025, and a crisis like Sudan is just not getting the traction that is needed. That's one. And then second, yes, it's very difficult for people like you and I to understand what is happening, just because it's also difficult for the media to even cover this crisis. There's barely any international journalists in Sudan. They're not being allowed in. Sudanese journalists are being attacked. One of them is being detained right now and has disappeared for the past 48 hours. Mobilizing the international conscience on Sudan has been extremely difficult, and it's not for lack of trying.
Now, tens of thousands of people have been killed in the 2.5 years of the war. More than 12 million Sudanese have been displaced. How difficult has it been for Sudanese people who've been forced to leave their homes, particularly those who have left the country?
You know, right now, for example, we're receiving people who are fleeing El-Fasher. So it's people who've been under siege for 18 months, who just went through a horrible journey through a desert, possibly being detained, attacked, looted on the way. And they arrived to an open air camp in the middle of North Darfur with barely any services. When we register them, we understand that a great majority of them have been displaced already 3 times. And these people haven't even made it out of the country. So this is a cycle of displacement. This is a cycle of trying to find refuge, and then the refuge becomes attacked, and then fleeing again. And every time fleeing on foot, fleeing by donkey, being attacked on the way, and less, capacity to to survive. The refugees right now also who've managed to flee Sudan are also in terrible situation. We're talking about people in some of the poorest and most vulnerable countries in the world, Chad, South Sudan. They are also not receiving the assistance that is needed, and way more support needs to come from the international community to those host countries so that they can have just access to basic services and basic dignity.